But then you still have to ask the question that if it's in the British national interest, the UK national interest to remain inside the EU, why then are we having this vote?
Yeah,
which is the big problem. And as in most things to do with foreign policy, and a lot to do with the European Union in this country, particularly in the UK possibly, it has a lot to do with domestic politics. And it has particularly to do with the domestic politics inside the Conservative Party. Firstly, you have to define what you mean by the United Kingdom, because by October of this year, it may be England, Scotland and Northern Ireland without. It could be England, Northern Ireland and Wales without Scotland. That's a possibility. So we've got two constitutional questions coming up really, and both are in some senses connected. One about UK's role within Europe, and then what the UK will be. Personally, I think the United Kingdom will remain the United Kingdom, and secondly, I think the United Kingdom will remain inside the European Union. And the reasons I think that the UK will remain inside the European Union is there's too much to lose if Britain loses and comes out of the EU. The consequences of coming out of the EU constitutionally, legally, economically, and in terms of influence are pretty formidable. For a variety of different reasons, which are quite complicated. There is now a very strong Eurosceptical, conservative, rather very conservative wing of the Conservative Party, who are very strongly anti-European, or at least want a very strong renegotiation of the terms. And they complain all the time about human rights. Can Britain control its borders? The whole question of the Bulgarian and Romanian has made a big difference to public opinion. Also, all these kinds of issues. And then, of course, standing outside the Conservative Party is, of course, UKIP, United Kingdom Independence Party. And many within the Conservative Party think that UKIP represents a serious political threat to their seats. So there's a lot of domestic politics going on here. So you have a clash really between the domestic politics inside the Conservative Party, UKIP, etc. on the one side, and then you've got the what I would call the broader interest of the United Kingdom on the other, and the two are not one and the same thing. In the end, I do feel that the vote will go to joining, remaining inside the European Union. However, I think the Tory leadership will have a scare, and they will be scared enough that they'll want to renegotiate some of the terms of their relationship with the European Union, which could in turn lead to more problems, particularly with Brussels and with Paris and indeed with Berlin.
Because in some countries like in Luxembourg there is a fear that Luxembourg could lose an ally in the form of the UK when it comes to financial services. Because the two countries have often been coordinating their positions, which would mean that internal politics within the Conservative Party, as you've outlined, would put a whole big bunch of interests of the UK into jeopardy, as it were. Is it feasible that those internal party struggles and the relationship with the UK Independence Party could still become uncontrollable, or do you think that this spectre of the UK really withdrawing from the EU is something which is maybe exaggerated by the media also, and not such substantial in threat as it might appear?
It's partly exaggerated by the media, but never blame newspapers for everything. You know, people like to do that in media. I think there's another fundamental problem, which also should be mentioned, is the UK economy currently is doing quite well. It's growing, not by much, but it's growing. It's not stagnating, jobs are being created, even manufacturing is going up. City of London looks like it's doing well, house prices in London are rising. There's a feel-good attitude at the moment in many parts, not all, but many parts of the United Kingdom. Then the British look across the Channel, they look at, not necessarily at Germany or Luxembourg or Holland or Scandinavia, but they look at France, they look at Spain, they look at Portugal, Italy, Greece obviously. And so well, the Eurozone is not doing very well, is it? So this reinforces the Euroscepticism. We could go better by ourselves. I think that's a false argument. The other thing I think we should also take into account, there's quite a lot of Euroscepticism in continental Europe as well. It's not just the British who are out there all by themselves being horrible to Europe. There are many continental Europeans who have strong doubts about the European project. It's producing stagnation, it's producing unemployment, it's creating resentment. Look how strong the Front National is in France. Look at what's happening in the Netherlands. You know, there is a general skepticism amongst increasing numbers of Europeans who are worrying that, you know, are we going to have another 2 years of stagnation, 3 years, 4 years, if we remain inside the euro or indeed inside the European Union. And again, so although it's about domestic conservative politics, it's about wider issues to do with the European project, how successful it has not been economically for many people over the last 3 or 4 years. And also the UKIP also gets a lot of support politically and ideologically, if you like, from other Eurosceptical parties in continental Europe. So this is not just a British problem, it seems to me. This is a more continental-wide problem as well.
And looking ahead into the future in the globalized world of the 21st century, of course, Europeans are an increasingly small proportion of that world. Also, the UK itself might be playing a smaller role if it is not in a bigger block of countries in a way. Is this an argument which is being often made here in the UK, that as a standalone it would be by far more difficult probably to take on the challenges of the globalized world than within the European Union, for example?
Yeah. Well, objectively, what you say is true. But it doesn't matter if objectively what you say is true.
Okay.
In other words, there are those in this country, particularly in the Conservative Party, who look at the world globally and say, oh, Europe is over. The future lies in the emerging economies. The future lies in Asia. The future lies in building new relations, say, with India or China or any number of new emerging economies. And so there is a strong tendency inside the Conservative Party to rethink its position, Britain's position in the world. So, well, Europe's kind of going to go down. As an independent country, we have more flexibility to define our policies abroad. The emerging economies are far more important and significant. Why not go for them? Can you forget for 1 minute that 40% of our trade is with the European Union? Let's just forget that for 1 moment, can we? Well, problematic. There's also other real downsides of this relationship between the UK and the European Union. Firstly, you're going to have much more influence inside the European Union than outside of it. If you're outside of it, you're still going to be determined by a lot of European legislation anyway. Look at Norway, look at Switzerland. You know, they're all going to be influenced by what goes on inside Brussels. They can't avoid half a billion people. You know, even if you break away yourself. So again, we get back to the fundamentals that the way out of this crisis, and I have a way out of this crisis, by the way. The way out of this situation is simple but difficult. We do need to get growth back into Europe. And we do need to give a definition to what the European vision is as well. And I think both of those things are really crucial. If we don't get the growth back in, Euroscepticism will continue right across Europe. If we don't get the vision back in, people would say, well, it's only an economic relationship, it isn't something larger. The truth of the matter is, and going back to your original question, that if Britain is outside the EU, it loses influence in Washington. Foreign investors will look more sceptically at Britain. You know, Britain is very, very friendly to foreign investment. You know. Britain is owned by everybody except the British, as some people would say. You know, even Wimbledon, all the people who win at Wimbledon, except once, for 50 years, you know, have been non-British. You know. Our football teams are non-British. You understand? I have no problem with that. You know, so we're a very open economy. We're a very open society, part of the global world economy. And clearly, if we're outside the European Union as a single country of 60 million, maybe fewer if Scotland leaves, then, you know, what influence are we going to have? And I mean, I think that really is a very, very powerful intellectual argument, strategic argument. Whether ordinary people in this country who, you know, can be pushed one way or another by emotional arguments and other arguments, whether they actually understand that, I think that's a larger question. But that's a question of communication by political elites, and this is where political elites, I think, are failing. And not just in this country, but I think across Europe to communicate what the European ideal is and why it needs to be put back, in a new and more what I call positive direction. Well, I think there are many people in the City of London who think they could lose quite a lot. And I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think they actually think they want to stay inside the European Union because for all sorts of reasons. And that therefore gives London an extraordinary great importance for the British economy. And London therefore cannot be seen ever to fail, because if it fails or it's weakened in any way, it goes to Luxembourg. Then this is simply not an option. It also sends out the wrong message. I mean, if London's a global city and then Britain leaves the European Union, that doesn't look very globalising, does it? I mean, it doesn't look like you're open for business. Yeah. No, we're very global. We're leaving Europe, with whom we trade to the extent of 40% a year. So I think it would send out a very, very bad message if Britain were to leave. And I think it would have a very negative impact over the longer term on the city's position. I think it would. And I think they, again, are making... What is interesting is how few industrialists and city people want to stand up and be counted at the moment. They're being very quiet. They know I know what they think. Yeah. I'm fairly certain, I'm pretty certain what I know what they think. But politically, they've been quite careful. I think closer we get to the referendum, I think then we will see a much greater, yeah, I think a much greater intervention by business and financial elites. Having Britain inside the European Union clearly is of a huge advantage. I think for the French it's a huge advantage, by the way. In terms of military cooperation and various other forms of cooperation. Yeah. Franco-German relations are not always as easy as it appears. You have, and in Germany, I think Mrs. Merkel, although she has some strong objections to some of the rhetoric coming out of London, nonetheless is well aware that she agrees quite a lot with Cameron on economic issues, deregulation, privatisation, etc., etc., etc. And then when you go to Italy, it's the same kind of story in Spain and Portugal. So it's Britain just loses an enormous amount of influence with a series of countries who clearly want Britain to stay inside the European.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the last point to finish off, you said we need to get the vision back. The vision, would that be, in your view, a European federation? Would it be something, as Winston Churchill described, with Britain in, or maybe not?
Oh, I knew you quote Winston Churchill. Yeah. Everybody quotes Winston Churchill. Look, we're going to come. This is not going to be easy. Let's be perfectly honest, because clearly, if Europe does become more integrated, federal, the word federalism is not a very popular word in this country. And I don't think it's too popular in some other countries either. I don't think it's terribly popular in Germany. And I don't think it's, except for Germany, but for the whole of Europe, I don't think many German voters would vote for a federal Europe. And I'm pretty certain that others have. So I think if we move forward, then clearly it will mean more coordination on foreign policy, coordination on a whole range of other issues, and maybe a much more integrated financial system, tax system, monetary system as well. One has, however, to make a balance here. This has always been both the genius of the European project and its great problem. How do you balance between people's national identities, sovereignty, beliefs that people are still French, German, British, Italian, whatever, and yet make Europe functionally relevant to the world, which requires a real Europe. Yeah. I think if we go too far in one direction towards federalism, you could lose a lot of ordinary people in this country and elsewhere. On the other hand, we can move in a certain direction, which gives greater power at the centre, if you like, or greater coordination, but we still got to manage public opinion, manage the views of ordinary people who are still very much attached to their own way of life, being German, Belgian, Dutch, Luxembourg, or whatever. And that, I think, is going to be the great diplomatic and great policy challenge, for the next few years.
Professor Cox, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.